Hi, hello, and welcome to a very different world. This week, because of that world, we're going to be making masks. I'm coming to you as a very amateur sewer to show you that you too could make a mask. What you'll need is a pattern, fabric, scissors, a marker, chalk, or charcoal, something to mark your fabric with, elastic, and a sewing machine. I've decided to make these masks that are more kind of cone-shaped rather than the flat ones with the pleats because I think for people with larger noses, I count myself among one of them, that these are a better way to actually get a good fit around the nose if you add a bit of metal to them. I'm using a pattern that was by Craft Passion, and she actually has a very good written as well as video tutorial. I changed a few things about it just because my skill level's a little bit less than what hers is, but if you'd like to check that out, check her page out. Here's the pattern that I'm going to be using. I ended up actually printing her pattern at 120% because I guess my face and my nose are quite a bit bigger than what her pattern was for the largest size. Also, what I'm using is what I have on hand. I have some cotton printed material that I'm using for the inside so it's softer. And then I'm also going to be using, I had bought a bunch of canvas that's going to be on the outside so that it's a thicker material that's more tightly woven so it will keep a little bit more out. Step one is pretty simple. You just need to trace the pattern. You're going to need two for each side. I am doing a double-sided thing, so for my cotton one, you trace each side and then you want to flip it over and trace the other side. And that, by flipping it over, you're going to ensure that you'll have the same side of the pattern showing on the correct side of the mask. And then you repeat that either on your same fabric if you're using the same for both sides or on your different one for the outside or inside. They make fabric pens and chalks, but I don't have any, so use what you have. I'm using a charcoal pencil. Step 2 is pretty obvious. We're going to want to cut them out. Go ahead and cut along the lines that you've marked. Step 3 is going to be prep and set out your materials. So you should have 4 different pieces of fabric cut out. And you're going to want to lay them out so that you know that you have the right pieces. And then you want to put them together so that they lay flat on top of each other with both rounded parts meeting. And if you had pins, this is the point where you would pin these together so that the fabric wouldn't move. But I don't have any. And I'm just going with it. So we go ahead and we're going to start sewing. I start by sewing the curved part of the pattern first. You're going to want this seam to be maybe about 1/4 inch in from where you start, and you just want to try to follow that line as best you can. You can watch me struggle. Slow and steady wins the race. Go along this curve when you get to the end to kind of tie off the thread. Go back and forth a few times. I am not a sewing expert, so if you have a better way to do this, absolutely go for it. When you have your first cut off, then you're going to want to cut off the excess thread. If you need to cut off or clean up any of the extra material, do that now. I always check my seams, and then we're going to do the exact same thing that we just did to that one to our other piece of fabric. Our next seam is going to be one that is going to connect these two pieces together. So we need to open this one because we're going to slot the other piece in. We have a nice seam there, so we just kind of open it. And then for the other one, we want to actually invert it. So we want the nice seam to face into the other nice seam so that when we flip this inside out, both of those concealed seams will be on the outside and the rough edges will be on the inside of the mask. So line these up, and again, if you had pins, this is where you would pin these in place so that they would be nice and lined up. This might also be why I have to cut mine a little bigger, because I have to have a little extra allowance for any little mistakes that I do make. But we line up and I do the hard one first, which is the top one. Because the other one, it seems like it's a little more forgiving. So if I make mistakes on the top one, I can kind of adjust on the bottom, but just follow right along the line, again, about 1/4 of an inch in. Be careful and slow down when you get to this middle seam and adjust as you need to. Finish that off, and then we will switch over to the bottom seam as well. So you've got one seam and you're going to flip this over. Again, you're going to line it up so that the edges line up as best they can. You would use pins if you had them. Again, and I'm not. I'm just going to take about 1/4 of an inch in, and I try to enforce the sides of my seams by going back and forth a bit at the very edges, and we just want to close this off. The current way I'm showing you will result after you wash in some frayed edges. I have added an extra step where before I close them together, I actually do sew each one of those sides in before closing it off. So you can go ahead and do that. Either way, how you're doing it, you're going to want to now invert the mask. And this is going to reveal the nice sides of your fabric. And you'll see that, yes, see we've got the nice concave area there for the nose and mouth. That's going to fit over your nose. And at this point, I want to add, personally, a nose wire so that it's going to fit better over my nose. So I have found that you can use pipe cleaners for this. You're going to want to snip those off, and I cut them a little bit longer than my index finger, and that's going to lay right up by the nose. If you're using a softer fabric, you might only need one pipe cleaner. I actually do two, just so that there's a little bit extra strength in being able to move that really heavy canvas around. And we just carefully kind of shove that up by the nose area. And then again, if you had pins, you would pin in the areas where you would actually be able to. I hold mine together and kind of just move slowly, and then I actually get them up right at that seam. I figure out where the seam ends on either side, and then I'm going to sew this into place. So basically I'm making like a little pocket that this is going to sit in. So I first go perpendicular to the mask line, and I'm going to go back and forth a few times. And once I get far enough in, I'm going to leave the needle down and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so that I can follow the parallel line of the top of the mask that's a little bit to the outside of this pipe cleaner, and close that all the way off. The hardest part is getting across this middle seam and making sure you don't have extra creases. You just want to get across that and go all the way past it so that it doesn't fall out, and then again leave the needle down, turn it 90 degrees so that you're going to be going perpendicular to the top of the mask, and finish that off, and that's going to hold that pipe cleaner right in that place. Now that we have the pipe cleaner in there, you can see you can actually move the fabric around and it stays in place, and that's going to allow you to cinch that around your nose. So we now have, in essence, our functional mask. We just need a way to attach it to our heads. They show a lot of these masks where they loop behind your ears, although I find that really uncomfortable, and everybody has different ear distances and sizes. So what I'm actually doing is I've been adding on 4 elastics that are long enough to where you can tie them behind your head so that you can better adjust how tight each side is. So you're going to want to cut 4 pieces of elastic. I used my palm plus about 2 inches from my tips to about 2 inches below my palm as a measuring. That would be about 8 inches to 10 inches for most people. So cut 4 of those, and then we're going to close off the sides, or you could just sew the elastics on, leaving a slot in the sides, because some people have said that you can actually insert like gauze or a vacuum cleaner filter into the middle to add additional protection. But what we do either way is we're going to want to sew those on. So if you had pins, again, you would slide it in and then you would pin it down. I don't. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it in and then use the foot to keep it in place. And then I'm going to sew, I'm closing mine off completely. So I'm going to sew all the way down until I get about 3/4 of the way down, and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to slide in that second elastic, and I'm going to sew over that, and they're in place, but I usually do a second seam just to ensure that it's actually going to stay in place, so it's double secured. Want to add the second seam. If not, flip it over and repeat the same step on the other side, where we insert the elastic into the one side and then we sew about 3/4 of the way down, insert the second elastic, and then reinforce seams if you want. And we have a mask. One thing, if you are an inexperienced sewer like me, pre-wash your materials. I learned that the hard way. If you wash the masks after you make them, they will shrink significantly and not be usable. So pre-wash and iron your materials before you get started. So I'm clearly no seamstress, but that means that anybody can do this. So now we have a mask, and when you put this on, you want to put it over your nose and mouth, and you want to tie it tight on both. The aim is to reduce the amount of gaps on the sides that are going to put a lot of air into the mask. So we want this to be flush, we want these to be flush, and then that's why I add the nose wire, because you can pinch and there should be very little gap around the nose. So now we have a mask. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. If you're local to Northern Colorado and would like to take a class, visit rebelunicorncrafts.com to see my class listings. If you'd just like to see what I'm up to, visit my Instagram at rebelunicorncrafts, or if you'd like to see my art, you can visit my other Instagram at LaceyWalkerArt. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a magically creative day.